So officially, good morning. Yeah. Good morning, everyone. See how we follow? I mean, it's time to lead, to really be the ones who initiate that first clap of the hands, moving of the feet, that robust good morning. But we tend to have a tendency to wait. What's going to be the response that I'm supposed to be giving here? Enough of that. You're in for a whole new ball game. And I offer you my personal congratulations and kudos on the demonstration of your consciousness in the selection of your new spiritual leader. And don't do the old hey-ho Steve Areno bit, that they used to do that with Steve Allen. He used to get very annoyed. So, I thought it would be interesting today to explore being present for what is before us. And I thought it would be a good opportunity to know that what evolved in the most recent happening of your selection of your new spiritual leader did not just come out of the blue, but it has evolved over a logical sequence that has produced this as its inevitable consequence. So when I started thinking in that continuum, in that creative edge that seems to start, but it's really out of nowhere other than the depth of consciousness, and it continues to weave its web, so that in the earliest days, my dear friend and colleague and prayer partner, Dr. Dennis Merritt Jones, arrived on the scene. And that had its day and its evolving of the consciousness of that time, that place, that which produced everything essentially that is currently in form. And that, when it was a completed experience, gave rise to Dr. Jim Lockhart. And he didn't come out of the ethers, out of the blue either. He came with his own story, development of consciousness, in fact, part of which some of you may know and others may not. He and I were co-pastors at Westlake for 3 years. So, do I hear a boo in the house? Wouldn't it be funny if, like, again, non-traditionally someone called out, so? I guess I'm always looking for the unprecedented, for that something which emerges out of what we talk about, the spontaneous eruption of a divinely inspired idea. And if it doesn't conform to what's already been, well, so what? Isn't that the purpose of evolution? To continue to have emerge ever higher levels of consciousness. So now it's like, so what is it I'm supposed to be present to that is before me, and what is before me? Anything that you say it is. I also have the feeling that it's easy for all of us to initially get very emotionally excited, caught up, and involved in something new. And the whole game that precedes it, whether it's a one-on-one relationship, just think of yourself at the onset of a relationship. Oh, good, I get to tell someone my story, and I can embellish it in any way I want because they won't know. And so the romance, the dance begins. I tell you, you tell me. I show you, you show me. And you know and I know when we're being honest, and if this teaching has taught me anything, it's about deepening my own willingness to be honest. Cut out the BS, belief systems that no longer serve. And come to that point of being willing, if not at this stage of my life, when am I going to be transparent? Hey, this is the time, this is the place. And so now is the moment to bypass the tendency of getting all excited, let's go check out the new guy. And I'll tell my friends, come along. But what happens after that initial moment of satisfying that immediate emotional urge and excitement and enthusiasm? For me, life is so much more about what do I do from this point forward? And what is it that is before me to do? What's before me to do in any event? The form is secondary to what causes something different to happen if you want it to be different. Or consciousness will cause the same thing to replay itself, just in a different form, a different face, a different personality. So what is before me is always to provide myself as the clearest, most beneficent divine presence that this civilization has ever seen, that this culture has ever seen. And for me, it's about commitment, to really be doing the spiritual practices more and more than ever before. And that involves really broadening the spectrum of this may look like someone new, and this could be the start of something new. I could break into song right here and right now. I promise I won't. I won't. So think about it. Think first of all about the only thing we ever bring anywhere is ourself. And yes, this constitutes a community that has come together because it's around a philosophy of faith, a way of life called the science of mind. So there is the common element. The other common element is we bring as much as the moment within us calls us to bring. We like to think of ourselves as being present in the moment. So don't ask me to sign my name on the dotted line or form a long-term commitment to be here, to support the new ideas or the reassessment of other ideas that were good in the past that may be able to be extracted and utilized from this point forward. But whatever it is, when I'm in for the long haul, I'm in for it. I recently had the wonderful opportunity to return to Edmonton, which was the place of my very first ministry. We had the first Church of Religious Science that was ever in existence in Edmonton. And it really shocked me to realize I did that 30 years ago. 30 years ago, I traipsed up to Edmonton in my little Cressida, my Toyota. Remember the Cressidas? That was a pretty car. And with my little U-Haul on top and my daughter by my side to keep me company on the ride up. And all the while, the part of me that is logical and clear thinking and can very easily let the pendulum swing toward fear. What the heck am I doing? Where am I going? Never even heard of this place. All the while, pendulum. Think of the pendulum really as that which is at its steadiest point, that point of be still and know. That still point within us that can come beyond all of the periphery. To just a relaxed, released knowingness. That's when the pendulum at its still point is the presence alive somewhere within our own awareness. We have enlivened to it. So there's no place to go. We're just at that still point. It's even great to form some kind of a gesture that is symbolic. So what if, you're in the midst of an excited conversation, let's say, with someone, but it's bordering on pushing up against some of those buttons. You're pushing your buttons because of something that's being said or done. What if, in the midst of this conversation, we were just to take our hands and put them right at the heart, which is where consciousness at its depth still point is, to remember in that moment that God is, I am. Let's say that together. And place your hands together right at the center of your heart. Just let's say together, God is, I am. Again, God is, I am. God is, I am. What happens is the tendency for that pendulum to swing toward defensiveness, toward fear, toward retaliation, toward a quick answer. That's what happens. The thought, the emotion, takes us from the still point, the moment of thought or of feeling, anxiety, apprehension. However, on this side as well, oh, look, this all worked out. Oh, I'm happy, I'm joyous, I'm delighted, I'm thrilled. God really is, I am. Either way, if the pendulum swings too far in one direction, it's got to bypass still point and go to the other direction. You see it yourself in watching the swing of a pendulum. So for me, it's so important to do the practices that start reminding me more instantaneously and consistently than ever before that no matter what is going on around here, people come, people go, places exist, places no longer exist. Things happen, they continue on, dissipate, and something new happens. That's the nature of life. It's impermanent. It's temporal. And it continues to form and then disappear and reshape and reform in different ways. However, what is changeless, what is permanent, what is immortal and infinite and everlasting is my recognition of my divine union with that which is. That's my salvation. When I went up to Edmonton, I had my expectations and about what this would all look like. 30 years, hey, I expected when I arrived at the airport, welcome home, Dr. Sue. No, just kidding, not quite. My expectations weren't met. So what did I do with that? Well, for heaven's sakes, what's going on here? This doesn't look, oh yeah, but it's fine. I accept in the present moment just what is. What is ain't. What is ain't. Bypass pendulum until I came to that point of just literally, sometimes it takes locking yourself in a room, no calls, no gadgets and gidgets, no disturbance, big sign on door, do not disturb, until I get clear within my own consciousness that what is before me and what I'm supposed to be present to is myself, my self-identity as an individualized expression of that which is all that is. So in looking at what is before you, yes, it will be anything you declare it to be, individually and collectively, because again, this is a community that is drawn together by what your vision is, teaching the spiritual principles of science and mind as transformative tools for our personal lives to feel better, look better, be better, so that we can contribute to a world that works for everyone. So another view, a broader view. In the days before magnetic compasses, in the days before maps and GPSs and all of those handy gadgets, the old navigators on the open Pacific Ocean and exploring the Pacific Islands, they had their own techniques they had to develop in order to keep their objective. Their objective was always to know where they were, their location, in order to equally see their direction, where they were headed. If that's not a metaphor for where everyone is every day of their lives, but in this case where you are as a spiritual community, you are here to know where you are in being here, which involves where you've been, where you are now, and that's again the segue, that continuum, that line of creative intelligence motivated by the presence of love, which takes it all, because in mind, in the infinite, there is no time or space. It's all happening now. If you thought about it yesterday, you're doing it now. If you're thinking about tomorrow, you're still doing it now. And so the navigators, at the very onset of their journey, did something that some considered contrary to the best approach. They navigated looking backwards at where they'd been. They called that, and the person who was the navigator was perceived as the wayfinder into the future. Direction. Location is here, but where are we going? The wayfinder. Are we not the wayfinders to a future that is a contribution from our deepest self of that which works for everyone? So the navigator would involve himself, I don't know there was a herself doing that at that time, in what they called back sight. Not backside, but back sight. And they would therefore gauge the direction the ship was to go to in terms of their ultimate destination by where they'd been. So, where have you been? What have you learned? How many of you were here from the days of early, whether it was the onset of Dr. Dennis or during his tenure? How many were here at that time? So you know where you've been. You know what worked, and you know what didn't work. And ideally, that's already been incorporated into what is and where you want to go from here in a harmonious, unified vision with your new leader. So there is the navigator perched, not looking at where they're going. He's gauging where they're going based on where they've been. And I think that is such a powerful letter that I can't discount my past, nor am I here to belabor it. Certainly we've all done enough of, wait, you don't know my story. Let's sit down, I'll tell you my story. That's good, that's cleansing, that's purifying, we get it out of our system. And how many times do we have to regurgitate it like the cow chewing its cud? Enough already. I go to the pendulum space within myself, of peace, of quiet, of stillness. So you can try to offer me all these thoughts and feelings, wonderful ego, personal sense of self, but you know something? I am still and I know who I am. So this is the game that goes on for a while, examining a clear look. You've got a history. You've got a rich history, and it's taken you to where you are. And if the vision, which is always what we talk about, is broader, wider, deeper, bigger, then you've got to know that I extract from what was the best of it, the principle that undergirded it, because that's what remains the same. And yet the tweaking of it and the adjusting of it and the modifications of it, because everything that we know and are hearing, you can't do church, quote, unquote, anymore the way you used to. It just doesn't work. So in order to embrace that point, just as the navigator, at some point in the journey, after you've had your back sight, you come to insight, gathering the information from yesterday, from Jim, from Dennis, from everything that you've done with speakers and with concerts and with all of what comprises your classes and your social events and your fundraisers. And you evaluate that as you do in your own world. The evaluation and the assessment of what goes on in a spiritual community is simply the larger version of what goes on in each and every one of your individual lives. How much you do your spiritual practices, how much you manage your emotions and remain at a calmer pitch within yourself. How much you're no longer preoccupied with pleasing people, with going along with the crowd, with speaking and being the first to clap or stamp or say, no, I don't agree with that. That's what you bring here. And if this isn't the time to bring the best of you, the finest of you, the highest of you, the dreamer in you, the visionary in you, to your new leader, and let that be a part of, I kind of miss church. It should be called the new church. whatever it represents, I think we're all searching, and that I speak of, in my own opinion, organizationally, in terms of Centers for Spiritual Living. We're still searching for our identity. We still don't know who the hell we are. Well, if we don't know it, how can we possibly expect the world to know it? So the clarity with which you know what this community is here for, because you know what you believe most deeply, you know what you value most highly, and you know what you want to give most fully and freely of yourself, and in a committed way that embraces the yesterdays that have brought me to my todays and where I want my today to lead me. So the navigator turns around. At some point, it's like, thanks for sharing. And now I'm very insightful. My back sight is steeped in my insight, and that takes me to my foresight of what's ahead. I can't ignore any of it, because number one, it's all what I'm being present and aware of right here and right now. That is, there is one principle of life, and I'm either going to rely on this divine principle for my good, for my answers, for my direction, for my solutions, for my health, for my money, for my creative expansiveness, or I'm still going to be grappling to bring the money in, to bring the people in, to get the word out, and have the events and stuff and printed matter and Googling and social media, which is all good, but it's secondary. Ernest Holmes said something so simple, talking about the levels of our own faith and conviction that causes us to rely on the divine principle for our good rather than on people, places, and things. He's not going to save you, Steve, and he's not going to suddenly arrive and you're going to find yourself with standing room only. Yes, you are, if that's your commitment to bring your standing room only consciousness to it. But if you're looking for anyone ever to do it for you, no one can do that. We're here to do it for ourselves, and that there are so many of us doing it for ourselves that we do it for each other, with each other, as each other, because really now there's only one operating, the one, the only, the all that is everything and everywhere. So, in this mix of insight, which I use for everything, what's the answer? What's the solution? What should we do here? Always, it's got to be second nature and yet first cause that we go, let's treat. When you hear confusion and the what ifs and how about this and why don't we try that, if that's not the moment to be still and know, the same way when you hear the siren of a police car or an ambulance or a fire truck go by. That's not the moment to go, oy vey, what's going on? It's a moment to say, God is on the field. All is well. I mean, you're either going to do this stuff and you're going to do it moment by moment by moment based on what the moment decrees and declares. That's being present to what's before you. Because what's before you and what's really behind you are small matters compared to what is within you. That was Emerson. What lies behind, what lies ahead are insignificant when held up against what is it that's within me, through me, and all around me. God is, I am. Let's say it again. God is, I am. God is, I am. You know, that whole vertical cross and Jesus on it that became the symbol of Christianity, it has such a deep metaphorical and metaphysical significance. The vertical is when you and I are standing at that still point, that unmovable still point of presence. That's the vertical grounding that we want to take with us before we go anywhere or do anything, say anything to anybody. And what we do with it then, that's the horizontal. That's where we give our expression of what I know. So I'm either knowing or I'm knowing I mean, we've got to formulate some way. We're dealing with a very abstract teaching. And in order to make it real, we've got to find our own little catalytic reminders to anchor us so that I don't emotionally react. All the time react. The phone rings. The phone rang about 5 o'clock yesterday morning. immediately my mind, what's wrong? Why? God is. Good morning. I'm bright and cheerful, and who the hell are you? And go away. You know, there is tough love. So with that in mind, I challenge you. I hold the gauntlet of possibility to you. Don't ignore what's been. Learn from it, grow from it, prosper from it, flourish from it. Stay in what you know is the best. And what Holmes said in that idea of remaining faith of that divine principle, he said manifestation follows easily on the heels of conviction. You got to be convinced about this stuff. You just can't play the game, show up for the big wine and cheese occasion, meet and greet, and then go home and never show up for the next 6 months. You've got to be consistent, because to the degree there's consistency in my inner practice, my outer actions reflect it. To the degree that I'm still a bit spiritually promiscuous, and I'm here, I'm there, and I'm anywhere, just call me and I'll go. To that degree, that's why there's good days and bad days. I remember how many times Dr. Dennis and I on a Sunday morning, we would treat at 7:30 every Sunday morning, and then invariably at the end of the day, he'd say, so how many were there at Westlake today? That's not the gauge. It's like, I know someone heard the message. Someone walked out with that healing idea, with that clearing idea, with that transformative idea, and became committed to living from that idea. So I am so excited for all of you, and I enjoy the thrust of backside, insight, and foresight as it takes you where, how, when, and whatever. The consciousness of the divine working through you dictates, informs, guides, and inspires. And I know, because that's what treatment is about, and I'm hooked on treatment, I know that it is already good and oh so very, very good. And that's the way it is. Thank you.